Hello, and welcome to WiCyS Presents Woman in the Middle. I'm your host, Jackie McGuire, and I wanted to do a special introduction for this week's episode because it is particularly impactful for me. I met Karen at WiCyS Live 2026 conference, and we instantly developed a bond. And we were talking about security, but then branched into a whole bunch of other areas based on a book that she had been working on. I wasn't aware of this at the time, but a couple months later, I would actually lose my sister. And her book has to do with the relationships we have with women in our families, which can often be complex and complicated. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. It's a little bit of a longer interview that spans everything from getting into cybersecurity before it existed to how we negotiate and navigate the relationships with women in our families and in our lives. I really hope you enjoy it and look forward to seeing you next time. Welcome back. We are live from WiCyS 2026. I'm Jackie McGuire, your host for Woman in the Middle, and I am joined by Karen Wortsell. Karen, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks, Jackie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we got a bunch of time to hang out off camera earlier, and we figured we should record some of this because I think some of the things we were talking about would be really valuable for other women to hear. We could talk for hours.
Yes, I know. I could talk to you forever.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you discovered WiCyS, how you got involved, because I know you do a couple different things for WiCyS.
Sure. Gosh, you know what? That's one of those things. It's like, where did we first meet? I'm not sure that I can remember, but I did go to the WiCyS conference, I think during the pandemic or just after the pandemic in Denver.
Okay.
And so that was my first conference that I attended, and really, really excited to be here for this one.
Yeah.
Part of what I ended up doing for WiCyS is doing this Create Your Leading Edge program. Mm-hmm. So we realized that it was really important for women to understand how we got here to be in this kind of a systemic, structural, I call it the water we swim in.
Yeah.
That is affecting our decisions about ourselves, about the way we show up, and the way others perceive us. So we created a program that would help walk us all through that and come out on the other end, with some strategies that are going to be very effective in helping women be more successful in a male-dominated environment.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that a lot of women say to me is like, oh, you're so confident. And I'm like, no, I just learned that it's okay to take up space.
Right, exactly. We're taught to shrink.
Yeah.
We're taught to make space for others.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. When you see women who should have an energetic space that kind of like holds ground about this far out, and then all of a sudden they bump up against somebody who really projects a lot of energy and they pull it all in.
Yeah.
Like they're acquiescing and giving ground. Yeah. And we don't even realize we're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So
even places like the sidewalk.
Yes.
The older I get, the more that if I'm walking down the sidewalk and there's a man coming towards me and he's in the middle of the sidewalk, I'm not moving. Right. Like, I'll bump into you before I move so that you can walk freely down the middle of the sidewalk.
I am extremely aware of that in airports.
Yes,
I watch that going through the airport. Yeah. Like I watch and like I feel like it's, okay, I'm walking in the river. Mm-hmm. Here's the current going this way. I'm walking this way. How much will the seas part or not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So tell me a little bit of how you got into security.
Oh gosh. Okay, so I've been in it for a long time. I got
You're an OG.
Yeah, completely by accident. Completely, because there was no such thing as computer security was called information security. Mm-hmm. My first textbook was Dorothy Denning's Cryptography and Information Security. I was in grad school. So the story basically, it's relevant to the story that I'm writing for the book that I'm writing, but I was a pretty broke mom with 2 toddlers, and I decided I was going to go back to grad school because I needed to make a job, you know. I mean, it's not that I didn't have anything. I had a background in cell biology and biochemistry.
Okay.
But I had stepped out of that and stayed home with 2 small children. And as it turned out, like the entire field made leaps and bounds of change. You know, we went from doing like protein sequencing to doing DNA sequencing while I was out with my kids. So I was obsolete.
Yeah.
And I needed to find something that wasn't going to be a laboratory science, having me work with hazardous chemicals, but would, you know, be something that I could do with kids.
Yeah.
And I perceived that to be computer science. So I got a master's degree in computer science. And it turns out my graduate advisor, he was like, you know, there's a project you need to do. Nobody else wants it. It's building fast hardware encryption using reversible Boolean logic. And I was like, sure, I need to graduate, so I'll do it, you know. I had no idea what it was going to involve. Turns out that was the foundation of CDMA, which is the cell phone technology that Sprint used for cell phones.
I used to sell CDMA phones.
Okay, so this was the foundation of CDMA.
I worked at Radio Shack.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, my favorite hangout.
What funny you say that. My mom, the small town I grew up in, there was a strip mall, and the grocery store was at one end of the strip mall, and then the Radio Shack was a couple stores down. And because it was a small town, my mom used to drop me off at Radio Shack and then go grocery shopping. And I was like maybe 4 or 5. They taught me how to use the first handy computer. So I actually learned a lot of stuff at Radio Shack as a kid because my mom didn't want to bring me in the grocery store.
Yeah. My first computer was a Radio Shack Model 1 with a serial number of 6.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Still in a storage unit somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I did this project, and then I was like, okay, now what? I need a job. And the Boeing company came to school, was doing a recruiting run. They liked the fact that I had done this thing, and I gave me a choice. I could be a data analyst, or I could be a security analyst. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do data analyst, like do keyboard entry. So I took the security analyst job, not having no idea what it was all about. And I ended up doing government projects. I was a security administrator on the computer side for the B-2 bomber, for the F-22, for a bunch of very cool projects.
So super inconsequential work.
Yeah, at the time. But at the time, like, who knew? Like, right? You couldn't talk about the fact that it even existed.
Yeah.
And now, wow. So it's kind of cool to watch it on TV. But the upshot of that was I did the government black project stuff for a little while, and then my boss came in. This is a funny story. My boss came in and he goes, we need to start a computer security program for the commercial side of the company. Okay. We didn't have one at the time, surprisingly, right? And everything was on mainframes, and we were getting ready to move to distributed computing. This is how old I am.
The black and green.
Yes, exactly. The lined printout paper.
Yeah.
And my boss says, we're going to need to raise some money. I need you to go find something that's going to help me make a case that we need to do this. And I was like, okay. And I came back about half an hour later with a big stack of green lined paper.
Yeah.
And I said, see if this will help. And I'll never forget, he was thumbing through the paper like this, and his face just dropped. And he's like, where did you get this, and who else has seen this?
Yeah.
And what it was I had been essentially with no special privileges gone into the mainframe computer and printed out the salary history of all of the executives at the Boeing company. And the way that they obfuscated this to make it secure was they took their social security number and reversed it. That was it, and so it was just really just so apparent of what we were looking at.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got our money.
That's awesome. Yeah. I was actually just thinking the other day about the fact that I grew up in New Hampshire and our driver's license numbers used to be the month of birth, the first and last letter of your last name, the first letter of your first name, and then some other thing I can't remember. And I was like, I bet you they've changed that by now because that's a really easy thing to reverse engineer.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, there was just, it's shocking what we have, what we know now, and realizing that we were living in a very innocent time.
Yeah.
We're kind of going through it again with AI, I think, but not thinking really about this is what the world could turn into, and this is what we need to do. I mean, this
More
was
a typewriter with a calculator, right?
Right.
Then, yeah.
This was years before the internet was commercialized. And you had all of this wide open kind of computing inside major corporations. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we can do e-commerce and we're going to hook everybody together. And it's like, wait,
Yeah. This might be a bad idea.
We might have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
And that whole idea of castle and moat, right, security models came from the fact that we had these castles and we were bringing in all of these connections and nobody knew how. There was no way to go in and secure everything that was inside. So the only way to do it was castle and moat. That's where that came from.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy to think we went from all you need is a firewall and an antivirus, keep everything out. If it gets in, we'll detect it and that's it. And now you have 10,000 different security tools that all claim that they can give you a single pane of glass for everything.
Yeah,
and
the complexity is actually staggering.
Yeah, well, and it's even like an inhibitor at some points for companies, but things get lost because you've got the same alerts coming out of 10 different tools with slightly different variations. But so what led you to want to write a book?
Well, I've done a couple of books in the cybersecurity space. This one is completely different. And it was born out, the backstory is that one of the things that I did during the course of my career in cybersecurity was I ended up being also the caregiver for my elders, all of whom had dementia. This also made me feel like I needed to be very healthy because I could see that my odds were not looking good. And my mother had Alzheimer's. And one of the things that was, well, let's see, without disclosing too much about it, I would say, like many women, my relationship with my mother had its stress points.
Girl, same.
And which I could never understand. Do you know what I'm saying? As a daughter, like what is happening here, and not really understanding that. And then as she progressed through her years of dementia, little pieces would pop out here and there, but she was silent always about her family. And it was a taboo topic. I was not allowed to know anything about my mother's family, and I didn't understand why. So essentially, when my mom passed away, there was quite a experience that happened where I felt like the baton got passed to me, and I wasn't sure what the baton was, but I took it as, at the time, as permission to go find my mother's family. And the upshot of that exploration and all of the research is a book that I call Her Mother's Daughter. And it is a history of 10 generations of women, because my mother's mothers, all of them go back to pre-Revolutionary War here in America or in the colonies. And I have traced their stories. And through property records, through wills, through documents. I've visited their graves. I've stood in their neighborhoods to try to understand the context of their lives. And what really became apparent to me as I was exploring this was, holy smokes, we are not just the daughter of that one woman. We are the composite of our mother's inheritance for generations of who they are and what their life experiences were. And it's important to tell those stories. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that as I get older is really profound to me is that you can't, like, even if you tell yourself, also have a somewhat complicated relationship with my mother and my father, and you tell yourself you're not going to be anything like them, but then all of a sudden you see these crazy patterns repeating, like very weird things, right? And so, my mom went to high school in Arizona, and I had never really, I was like, ooh, Arizona, and then I ended up in Arizona, through no intention of my own, ended up moving for my partner's family because they were sick and they were in Arizona, and there are just these things that kind of like these weird idiosyncrasies that just kind of repeat themselves through generations of people, both, trauma, but also just weird life experiences. And to me, it's like, I swore I was never going to be anything like my mom, but wow, there's a lot of things about me that are like my mom, or I'm having these very specific weird life experiences that are identical to things that I know that my mom went through. And so, yeah, I think you're right. And I always wonder about that. Is it like dark matter, or is it like, part of the simulation, or,
Well, Carl Jung actually named it.
Yeah.
And he called it impersonal karma.
Yeah.
He said, we are the product of our ancestors' unfinished business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's probably true.
I am finding that to be true.
Yeah.
And the patterns that you recognize, right? The little synchronicities and serendipity. It's not, in some ways, it perhaps is not serendipity. I think there's certain elements of that are inheritance.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, someday when we understand so much more about energy and matter and how energy is preserved, and I just kind of think, well, there was a certain amount of energy by this particular existence, and it got passed along, right?
Yeah, I read a lot about quantum entanglement, because it's one of the things that I think is really fascinating, which is quantum entanglement is this part of quantum physics where if you put two atoms together, they can become quantum entangled to the point that no matter how far apart you put them, including the International Space Station, anything you do to one of them has a direct impact on the other one.
And so, effect.
Yeah, and so, I wonder to the extent that just being in proximity to another human, you quantumly entangle with them. Certainly the case with my partner, it almost feels intrusive sometimes that he and I share a brain, that no matter, that he'll say things that were about to come out of my mouth all the time, and I'm like, give me back my thoughts.
Oh yeah, well, or I have this with my kids, my adult children. We are entangled for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Because it's like, even since they were small children, how you wake up before they cry.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's like, I'm thinking about them and the phone rings.
Yeah.
Or
you feel weird, you have a weird dream, and you're like, they call you with a problem, and you're like, yeah, I kind of saw that coming because I had this weird mother tingle that,
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I think that's for real.
Do you feel like you've learned more about yourself in this process?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it explained, well, in some ways it felt like there was a validation of my own choices and struggle as I grew into adulthood, as I was a mother. And there's and it's relevant, I think, for us as women in cybersecurity and women in any male-dominated. We live in a male-dominated world.
Yeah.
This is a man's world.
Yeah.
And some of us choose to magnify that and go work in a male-dominated industry. And there are elements of that just are. And they have been in place for centuries. And I have documented this to some extent by virtue of my, sixth great grandmother's experience in Virginia, where under the laws of coverture, she had no rights to her own children, let alone property, right? Let alone making any kind of consequential decision. It shows up in the ways that women's contribution to the gross national product, right? Contribution in the household, all of that labor is actually not tallied and counted, right? So we have this very skewed idea of what kind of work constitutes valuable work.
Yeah.
And because the work that we do, that every single woman knows what she does in her household, whether it's a household with children or without children, there is a significant contribution that gets made that is never on any balance sheet.
Yeah.
And we know what that looks like, but that shows up in so many ways. And when I, made my choice as a broke mom to go back to work, and chose a field, fortunately, that actually was very well compensated, right? But it wasn't unspoken, it was spoken, words that came from my partner at that time, who is no longer my partner, were, great, go back to grad school, just don't let anything else slip. Right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about that is it's kind of easy to bristle at that remark, but they grew up in the same water I'm swimming in. Like that is a cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
And seemed very valid to them probably to say such a thing.
Yeah.
And just as I took it on and said, hold my beer.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say that because my partner is he's amazing. Like, he is just amazing. But yes, I think, as we moved in together, got married, had kids, there were things that I just took. Like, it wasn't like he was like, this is woman's work.
Right.
I was like, this is my duty because I'm the woman, and I think it took me getting really sick. I developed epilepsy, and I was more or less like incapacitated for almost 2 years because of it, until we finally got it under control, got on the right meds, and he had to take over everything. And I mean everything. It was like there would be times that I would get vertigo so bad I would be in bed for weeks on end. And so I don't think he didn't appreciate the work that I did. I just think there's so much, you use the term emotional labor, but it's just everything. It's like cleaning the lint out of the dryer filter, like things like that I've just always done. Or like picking, I remember, not my proudest mom moment, but screaming at my kids one time. I was like, I'm the somebody. Because, it's like when they leave their socks on the floor, and I'm like, every time you do one of these things, you're like, oh, somebody will take care of it. I'm the somebody. And like, you need to see that. Yeah. And so I don't even think I don't think it's a conscious decision that men make to do those things. I really feel like it's just, that it's a two-part system, and that it just keeps perpetuating because we saw our mothers silently do this work. And so you're not obvious in saying like, hey, I'm keeping mental inventory of everything in the fridge, and I'm going to know exactly what we need every time we go grocery shopping, and I know the specific brand of every single thing we buy and the specific things our kids like. And like, that was not something that I was ever told to do, or I think my husband expected, as much as it was just that was what my mom did, so it's what I did, And so once he had to take all of that on, it was actually one of the best things that's happened in our relationship, because he can now share that load, because he had to go through and know all of the brands of everything. And so like, we have a much more equal partnership now than we did before my health issues. So that's one of the nice things that came out of that, is that like he really kind of registered like, wow, there is so much that I don't know about how our life operates and so many things that just happen. And he has his own things, right? Like I don't really take the trash out. Like there, you know, when things break, like I'm capable of fixing them, but I don't. But yeah, I definitely think it's not always an intentional or mean-spirited thing that happens.
That is such an important thing for us to acknowledge and recognize, because it changes how we frame things, and it changes how we respond to the microaggressions and the not so microaggressions that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, right? Whether they're at home or in the workplace. We absolutely have an unequal distribution of labor. Most women who are trying to work in our technology field have a very unequal distribution of labor at home, especially if they have children and they're primary caregivers for children. Any man who's a primary caregiver for children also has an unequal distribution. But it's important for us to recognize that this is not born out of malice.
No,
This is born out of a cultural conditioning that has been in place for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's why I call it the water we swim in. And I think it's important to kind of reframe a lot of it. Because just as, you know, my partner spoke something that was, you know, all those years ago, that was incredibly unfortunate. Let's just call it. You know, and from my standpoint and from my own personal well-being and health and everything else that I ended up doing in order to get through grad school, he was the product of all of that conditioning just as much as I was. So, you know, I love one of the things that Brene Brown says, that what is it? That fear and, is it fear? Fear and anxiety, it's not anxiety. What is it? When we're nervous about something, when we're feeling really anxious, I guess it is anxiety. When we're feeling anxious about something, or we're feeling very excited about something, physiologically, those two things are the very same emotion. And why it's important to distinguish it. Like, for example, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, I have to give this talk tomorrow, gets reframed as, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I get to give this talk tomorrow. And it changes our choice of how we take our next steps. And so that's why I think it's important. Reframing is such a powerful tool. When we look at the water we all swim in, we're all swimming in it. And when we can take a look at that and recognize how that affects us, then we can make conscious choices about how we frame it to say, this is what my next steps are going to be. I'm going to take these next steps not out of anger and resentment. I'm not going to react to that thing that person said. I am going to choose how I'm going to choose my next action.
I always think too about primary and secondary emotions. And to me, anger is almost always either a secondary or tertiary emotion. And there's almost always a more vulnerable emotion below that that's the primary emotion. So anger is almost always a result of disappointment, betrayal, like some very deep and vulnerable thing. Exactly.
That's so good to recognize. You know what? For me, I'll just tell people. My big kryptonite is rejection. And I mean, as I'm sure it is for lots of people, it's a very negative emotion to experience. However, I can also, through this genealogical, like generational study, I've looked at the absolute types of rejection that people, they were not just, you made me feel bad, they were existential crises. when you have that kind of, that's really what is behind all of it, right? And why we feel it so powerfully. And yeah, you know what? It's like, I want to go pound the daylights out of a feather pillow, or something.
Yeah.
Because it makes, it's called a crazy eight. Like, we can live in this bad feeling, sadness, call it just generalized sadness, like the feeling of rejection. Ooh, that feels terrible. The crazy eight side of that is anger. And we use anger to get out of this bad feeling. This is not the place I want to stay. Anger, that is something that works for me, right?
Yeah.
However, that's not a very great adaptive behavior. We have to learn to recognize that and figure out how to get off the crazy eight train.
Yeah, because rejection is very internal, whereas anger is very external. And so rather than kind of stew on the inside, sometimes it feels better to project it outside. But I don't know, I think my emotional plasticity has definitely improved as I've gotten older. And, I can't sit in any emotion for too long just because there's always another thing. And maybe it's just my life has gotten so much more complex, managing the little miniature lives of teenagers, plus my life, plus my 8 side businesses, So luckily I kind of process something and then I move on. And I think I probably went 20 years without crying. Like literally. I didn't cry for a very long time because I thought that it made me tough or something. I don't know. But then, after having kids and once I started crying again, it was just such a cathartic way to just deal with something. And so I got, like, especially as crazy as the world is, I'll go get coffee sometimes in the morning from somewhere, and I call it my coffee cry, because sometimes there are mornings that I just need to get it out. And so I will cry for like 5 or 10 minutes on my way to or from picking up coffee. And then I feel so much better when I get home. And it's like I got it out. It's like there's nothing I can do about this. So like I just need to process it and then I can move on.
Wow, that's fantastic. What a great adaptive behavior. I mean, there's some biochemistry involved in that too. That your tears actually carry some things away for you.
And it lowers cortisol, and like you don't want to cry until your eyes are bloodshot and you're out of breath and like there's like hysterical
not ugly
crying.
cry.
Yeah. Every now and then I'm good for an ugly cry, but yeah. Well, this has been amazing. I feel like we could do like 6 more hours of podcasts on just all of the things that are, the underlying things about being a woman and existing as a woman, but also, trying to also exist in a very male-dominated world and having these two kind of conflicting experiences. So hopefully you'll come back. We'll do a longer episode on this.
That'd be amazing. I would love that. Let's do it.
All right, Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Jackie McGuire live from WiCyS 2026. Stay tuned for more.